December 10th, 2008. A 7-0 year. Old man sits in his Manhattan penthouse and tells his two sons the truth for the first time in nearly 2 decades. The account statements, the trades, the returns, the entire foundation underneath $65 billion of other people's money. None of it exists. It never did. April 27th, 2017. A private jet lands in the Bahamas. The passengers paid up to $12,000 each to attend what was advertised as the most exclusive music festival in the world. Within 12 hours, they will be standing in the rain, soaking wet, fighting over cheese sandwiches, watching the whole fantasy collapse on 1,000 phone screens simultaneously. 2 completely different disasters. But here is the thing nobody talks about when these stories get told. It was not greed that made both of them possible for as long as they were. It was not stupidity on the part of the victims. It was one specific flaw in how human beings evaluate trust, and it is the same flaw in both cases. A billionaire investment legend and a 25-year-old with an Instagram budget exploited the exact same psychological opening. Once you understand what it is, you will never look at an impressive pitch the same way again. Today we are walking through the greatest scams in modern history, how they were built, how they stayed hidden, and why some of the smartest people on earth kept writing the checks. Bernie Madoff was not supposed to be a villain. For most of his career, he was the opposite. He built his brokerage firm from scratch with $5,000 he had saved, working as a lifeguard and installing sprinklers in the summers. He became chairman of the NASDAQ Stock Exchange, one of the most powerful financial positions in the country. When Bernie Madoff told you he could grow your money, you believed him, not because he was flashy, not because he promised the moon, but because everybody else already did. For decades, that social proof was the entire product. The problem was that Madoff had stopped actually investing sometime in the early 1990s. Investigators still debate the exact moment. What they agree on is that at some point, the trading stopped and the manufacturing began. Every month, clients received detailed statements showing steady, reliable growth, gains in good markets, small losses in bad ones. The kind of smooth, almost impossibly consistent performance that experienced investors should have questioned immediately. Because genuine markets do not behave that way. Nothing real ever moves in such a clean, predictable line. But the statements looked convincing, the letterhead looked legitimate, and the man behind it looked like the last person on earth who needed to steal from you. Here is what he was actually doing. He was taking money from new clients and using it to pay returns to old ones. No trades, no portfolio. Just a river of cash flowing in one direction, hidden behind thousands of pages of fabricated paperwork. Think of a restaurant with no kitchen. Customers walk in, orders get taken, plates arrive at the table, but nothing is being cooked. The food is coming from somewhere else entirely. The moment the supply runs out, the whole illusion collapses. The scale is genuinely difficult to hold in your head. At the time of his arrest, clients believed Madoff was managing $65 billion. Retirement savings, charity endowments, generational wealth that families had spent lifetimes building. None of it was real. The actual cash sitting in the accounts was closer to $17 billion. The rest existed only on paper, in statements his team had invented from scratch for years. But here's what actually kept the operation alive for so long, because it was not just Madoff's name doing the work. He operated through feeder funds, third-party firms that pooled money from their own investors and funneled it to him as one giant block. These firms sold themselves as offering exclusive access to a legendary manager. Some of them charged their own clients 2% management fees and 20% of profits just for the privilege of routing money to Madoff. Most of their clients had no idea their money was going to him at all. They just knew the returns were good and the people managing their accounts seemed credible. Each feeder fund added another layer of separation between Madoff and the people whose savings were disappearing, which meant the machine kept expanding far beyond anything he could have built alone. and every new layer made it harder for anyone on the outside to see what was happening at the center. By the end, Madoff was not running one scam, he was running a franchise. For 17 years, nobody who could stop it did. The collapse came from outside. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, markets crashed and people panicked. And when people panic, they want their money back immediately. Thousands of Madoff's investors submitted withdrawal requests at the same time. The firm could not cover them. The gap between what the statements claimed and what actually existed became impossible to paper over. His internal team calculated a $7 billion shortfall in pending withdrawals alone. Now here is the part that should make anyone paying attention genuinely furious. A financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos had been trying to blow the whistle for 9 years. Starting in 1999, he submitted detailed reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission, explaining, with math, exactly why Madoff's returns were mathematically impossible. He titled one report, "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." He told the SEC it would take him about 5 minutes to prove it. The SEC investigated, found nothing. He submitted again. Same result. He went back a third time. Same outcome. Markopoulos later testified before Congress that he had spent years genuinely afraid for his own safety, convinced that a man with that much money and that much reach would not let a whistleblower survive long enough to matter. He had told his wife what to do if he disappeared. He changed his routines. He varied the routes he drove to work. And the regulators whose entire job was to catch this never once asked him a serious follow-up question. In the end, it was not the watchdogs who brought Madoff down. His own sons did. When he finally told his family the truth, they called federal authorities the next morning. Now, keep that in mind as we move to a different story, a different decade, and a man who somehow convinced thousands of people to hand him thousands of dollars each, with no track record, no financial experience, and no actual product to speak of. In early 2017, a 6-second video appeared on Instagram. Supermodels, clear blue water, yachts drifting through the Caribbean. The suggestion that something spectacular was approaching, with no details attached, just a feeling. Dozens of the most followed accounts on the platform posted the same orange tile on the same day, no caption, no explanation. Within 48 hours, the internet could talk about nothing else. The campaign had cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and been engineered with military precision. It was, in retrospect, the most expensive trailer ever made for something that did not exist. The thing being sold was Fire Festival, a luxury music event on a private island in the Bahamas, formerly owned by Pablo Escobar, according to the marketing. Tickets ranged from $1,500 to over $12,000 for premium villas and gourmet catering. This was not positioned as a music festival. It was sold as a cultural moment available only to people who moved fast and did not hesitate. Tens of thousands of people did not hesitate. The festival sold out in days. Behind the campaign was Billy McFarland, 25 years old, co-founder of the event alongside the rapper Ja Rule. McFarland was no stranger to selling access to things that did not quite exist. Years earlier, he had launched a company called Magnesis, which promised young professionals a black metal card and entry into an exclusive social club. The club was mostly smoke, but it worked well enough to give him the confidence and the mailing list to try something far larger. What nobody buying tickets knew was that at the moment of purchase, there was essentially nothing on the island. No stages, no signed artists, no accommodation for the hundreds of guests expecting private villas. Members of the production team raised serious concerns almost immediately. One production coordinator, who flew to the island months before the event, described finding a plot of raw land with no infrastructure, no water system capable of supporting thousands of guests, and a crew that had no realistic plan for how any of it would come together in time. She put her concerns in writing. McFarland told her it would be handled. Many people like her quit. McFarland kept selling tickets. He kept running promotions. He kept telling everyone it would all come together, because to him, confidence was always the complete plan. The gap between what he was promising publicly and what he knew privately was not a miscalculation. It was the business model. April arrived. Thousands of ticket holders flew into Nassau expecting the experience they had been sold. What they found instead was disaster relief tents where the villas were supposed to be, sliced bread and processed cheese in styrofoam containers where the gourmet catering was supposed to be, and an unfinished festival site with almost no artists anywhere near it. The acts had either never been properly booked or had quietly withdrawn once they saw what was actually happening on the ground. The attendees pulled out their phones, and the same platform that had sold them the dream broadcast the collapse, frame by frame, to the entire world in real time. The embarrassment of wealthy 20-somethings who did not get their private villa is easy to write off. The part that is not a punchline is what happened to the people who were not there by choice. Local vendors in the Bahamas had bought supplies in advance and were never paid. Laborers spent weeks building whatever infrastructure existed without compensation. One woman named Marianne Roll, who ran the main catering operation, spent $50,000 of her own life savings feeding festival staff in good faith. She received nothing back. A GoFundMe campaign started by strangers eventually covered her loss. Most people on the ground were not that lucky. McFarland was arrested 2 months after the festival collapsed, convicted of wire fraud, sentenced to 6 years. He served 4. Madoff was arrested the morning after his sons made the call, convicted of 11 federal felonies, sentenced to 150 years. He died in prison in April 2021 at 82. 150 years was not a calculation. That number was a statement. The people we're thinking about here are not the 2 men who ended up in jumpsuits. They are the 37,000 individuals and institutions who filed claims after Madoff's arrest. Among them was the Elie Wiesel Foundation for Humanity, which lost nearly all of its assets. Wiesel personally lost his life savings. Dozens of Jewish charities trusted Madoff for decades in part because he was a prominent member of their own community. He did not steal from strangers. He stole from the people closest to him. Then there were the ones nobody recognizes. Retirees who watched their savings grow on fabricated statements for 40 years, only to learn they owned nothing. Widows whose late husbands had handed the family money to Madoff on the assurance it was safe. Families whose entire financial future was built on numbers that were never there. That is not an abstraction. That is someone's ability to pay for surgery, someone's ability to send a kid to college, someone's entire idea of what their life was going to look like, built on a lie that one man decided was easier than doing the actual work. What connects these 2 stories is one simple thing. Neither man had a product. Madoff had statements. McFarland had an Instagram campaign. Both understood that if you can make people believe something hard enough and long enough, you can delay the reckoning almost indefinitely. What they were actually selling was never an investment return or a music festival. It was the feeling that something real was happening, that someone trustworthy was in charge, that the numbers would eventually make sense. And because that feeling is so close to what genuine opportunity actually feels like, most people never notice the difference until it was already over. Skepticism costs you something. It makes you the person who missed out, the cynic, the one who did not move fast enough. Trust feels like reward. The best scammers in history have always understood that gap better than the rest of us. The paperwork is thin because the product is thin. The pitch is perfect because the pitch is the product. And the harder someone works to make you feel lucky just for getting access to what they are selling, the more carefully you should be looking at what is actually underneath it. Drop a comment telling me which scam to cover next, because there is no shortage of material. And if you want to stay on this thread, I just covered the collapse of Theranos using the same breakdown, and that one gets even darker. It is on your screen now.